Hello. The purpose of this video is to review the draft of the revised statewide IEP document. Before we finalize the document, we are interested in receiving your feedback. The draft IEP document will be posted for public comment for 60 days. The BSE met with a diverse stakeholder group who assisted us with the draft of the new IEP. Our goal was to create a document that is less complicated for educators to use and easier for parents and students to understand. Additionally, we strived to design a document that is aligned with the decision-making process of the planning and placement team. The document being reviewed in this presentation has not been finalized and is currently in draft status. This document will not be finalized or used during the 2019-20 school year. A few notes before we begin. The new IEP is designed to be adaptive and supported by an electronic data system. Some of the information that is on our current IEP will not appear on the new IEP, with the understanding that this information will still be collected and stored in the electronic system. Also important to note, the prior written notice page of our current IEP, page 3, is not part of this new draft IEP. It is being planned as a separate document. Let's begin. The new IEP draft is not based on page numbers like our current document, rather is based on sections. The first section that you are seeing here is the student demographic and other information section. This information is on page 1 of our current IEP document. You may notice that some information is not on the new draft IEP. Information such as student address or contact information. This information will still be collected and available for staff. However, it'll be found within the electronic system. The next section is the PPT member attendance section. There is a place for the name of each PPT member who attended the meeting and their role. Additional lines may be added as needed. Below the PPT attendance is a statement regarding the student's special education eligibility status. Yes, no, or pending if they are currently in the referral process. Next is a new optional section of the IEP called the student profile. This section provides an opportunity for the parent, student, and school-based team to document important information about the student's interests, accomplishments, and other information which will help the PPT understand the whole student, both inside and outside of the school environment. This section was added with the understanding that a student is not defined by their disability. The next section, special considerations. This section contains information that is currently on page 10 of our IEP. These things really should be considered before developing the child's IEP. It makes sense to move these items closer to the front of the document. Again, only the selections that are chosen will appear through the adaptive system. For many students, what is printed out will only be the question and the answer no. So this section would shrink considerably in the final document, making the final document less crowded and easier for people to read. The next section is transition planning section. There is a prompt question asking if the PPT is developing post-secondary transition goals and services. If the answer is no, the following sections around transition would not appear on the IEP. They would only appear if, in fact, the student was going to receive transition services. Transition services begin with post-secondary outcome goal statements. The independent living goal would only appear if the answer to question number 2 is no. Course of study is part of transition programming, and that's the next section that would appear if there is transition services for the student. Transition annual goals come next. There's a goal for education training and for employment. The last row in each of these sections is there to indicate if that goal for transition is being addressed through another annual goal, say an academic goal such as writing or a behavioral goal. If that's the case, the goal number would be entered and the rest of the box would not appear. The independent living annual goal would only appear if there is a post-secondary goal statement for the student. The next section is the annual goals and objectives section, along with present levels of performance. There are two domains in this section. Domain 1 covers academic and cognitive achievement, and domain number 2 is for functional performance. These two sections are very similar, and the goals would be divided depending on if they're supporting the student's academic achievement or functional performance. Let's take a closer look at the information provided in these sections of the document. First, there's a place for each domain for parent and student input and concerns. There's also a section to enter data and assessment information for the domain area. After that, specific area is chosen, for example, reading or mathematics. For that area, more specific present level of performance, strength, concerns, need, and impact statement data are provided. Once the area has been determined, annual goals and objectives will be developed for that area. Through the adaptive system, as many annual goals for that area will be added. A goal statement, short-term objectives, and an evaluation schedule are all part of this area. There's also a section to record what Connecticut core standards are aligned to the goal. And finally, a section to indicate if supplemental aids and services are needed for the student to achieve the goal. The service information is also provided here. Supplemental aids and services include accommodations, modifications, assistive technology, as many rows as needed through the adaptive system. Finally, if a related service is necessary for the student to achieve and master the goal, that would be indicated there as well. If the student is working on more than one area, this would repeat as many times as needed. The domain area 2 for functional performance would be repeated after the academic cognitive achievement section. Any goal areas for functional performance, such as communication, social skills, behavior, would be in that domain and the corresponding annual goals as well. The next section, additional supports and services, is available to list services that the student may need that aren't necessarily attached to a specific goal. Things like a special chair or a visual schedule. There's a prompting question asking if these types of supports are needed. If the answer is no, the chart would disappear. Next, the special education and related services section is what's commonly referred to as the page 11 grid on our current IEP document. It's very similar to what we currently have. One exception is that there is now an indirect services grid. Supports required for school personnel to implement the IEP. This information is currently recorded on the bottom of page 8. However, on the new document, there's a separate section to indicate if any of these services are needed. Things like consultation time or a classroom paraprofessional. The instructional site codes have also been updated. There is a code for homebound or hospitalized instruction, and also a code for instruction conducted in the home. While they sound similar, they're different in that instruction conducted in the home is the PPT's placement for the student, whereas homebound or hospitalized instruction requires the consultation with the student's physician and is generally more of a short-term type situation. The next section is for extended school year services. There's a prompting question, no or yes. The grid would not appear if the answer to the question is no. If the answer is yes, there is a place to record the ESY services and indirect services if needed. The next section is transportation. Does the student require special transportation as a related service? The next section, removal from the general education environment. This section is where the team would record total hours, time with non-disabled peers, and provide the justification if the student's removed from the general education environment. There's also a prompt that requires the use of the LRE checklist if the student is removed from the general education environment for more than 60% of the time. District and state testing information is next. The first part here is the English language proficiency assessment. Then, district-wide assessments. The next section is statewide assessments. And the first part here is to indicate which grade level the student will be in during the next statewide assessment testing window. The idea is that the system will use the answer to the ELP question and the grade level to determine which of the following will show for the team to consider. You can see each of the sections here is based on the answer to, is the student an English learner, and what grade is the student. All of the other information would not appear. If the student is going to be taking alternate assessments, the next section is where the team would record the justification for that. And finally, administrative options for accommodations. The final sections cover the transfer of rights, progress reporting, PPT recommendations, and resources. Finally, the Bureau of Special Education will continue to revise the draft IEP as we receive input and suggestions from the field. It's important to note that implementation and use of the new IEP document is still a couple of years away. If you'd like to provide feedback, please click on the link below this video. Thank you.